Hello everyone, welcome back to a very special episode of the Spirit of Prophecy podcast. Today we are going to be discussing a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, something I care about greatly. That is the subject of the Temple Mount location. If you have not seen the documentary, A City Lost yet, you need to check that out. It is a great documentary. You don't want to miss that. But since we've done that documentary, I continue to learn things from the scriptures that prove we're right about it. And whenever I learn these things, I just have to share them. And I don't want to continue preaching this from the pulpit, so I like to use my podcast as my platform to just kind of nerd out on this subject and talk about these things. And I hope this is something that you're interested in. And if you are, you're definitely going to want to pay very close attention. We're going to be putting a lot of stuff together from the scriptures, and we are going to prove to you that the temple was built in the city of David in the Bible. I'm going to prove that to you. And then I'm going to show you why I believe that this area here is in fact the city of David that the Bible describes. And so again, even if I prove to you that the temple was built in the city of David, I can't prove just from the Bible that this is in fact the city of David. We are going to be depending on things like history and archaeology to determine that. But first, biblically, I'm going to show you the temple was built in the city of David. There are those who are claiming it wasn't, and I'll show you why they make that claim, and I'll show you where they are wrong, and I will prove my point to you. But then after we do that, I will show you why I believe this area lines up with what we see in the scriptures about that area, and there is no reason that we should doubt the archaeologists when it comes to this area being the city of David. They will tell you this is Mount Zion, this is the city of David. If they are right, then that would mean this is where the temple was built, not in that other place. And so there are many arguments that people try to use against this, and let me just say most of them are very bad arguments that are dependent on the audience being ignorant about the location of the city of David. They are dependent on people not being familiar with the area. It's too many things they claim are really just laughable if you're somebody who's actually familiar with the area. And so I want to show you some things from the scriptures that are going to leave no doubt that the temple was in fact built in the city of David. And then we're going to show you why we believe this area here is in fact the city of David. So in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus prophesied how when it came to the temple, there would not be one stone left upon another. It makes sense we would look for the temple somewhere where there's no evidence of a temple, because we were told there wouldn't be one stone left upon another. Now that's exactly what we see in this area over here. Now in the other location, you have a lot of stones that are still there. You have the western wall that they will tell you was a part of the western wall of the temple. And if that's the case, Jesus' prophecy was not true. So that doesn't make any sense. But also it was prophesied by Micah and Jeremiah that Jerusalem would be plowed like a field and it would become heaps and dens of dragons. There's no evidence that ever took place on the traditional spot, but that's exactly what this place was. Most of the things that they have found and dug up, they had to dig through several feet of dirt to even get to it. You know why? Because it became heaps and dens of dragons. This area describes exactly what the prophets spoke about in Jeremiah 26:18 that was quoting Micah in Micah chapter 3 and verse 12. And so we're also looking for a place too that according to history that there was a purposeful effort to remove the memory of the temple. That's exactly what history records Hadrian doing after the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 2nd century. So again, the lack of stones and lack of temple materials that we find in this area, I mean, that fits what history describes and what the Bible prophesied would take place. But the fact that nothing's there can't be proof. We also need to see if the scriptures tells us about something that was in the area of the temple or close proximity of the temple that would cause us to believe that this was in fact that area in the city of David. And we will show you that. But first, what we need to do is we do need to show biblically that the temple was in fact in the city of David, and we're also going to debunk the arguments against the temple being built in the city of David. And when I say city of David right now, I'm not necessarily saying modern day city of David. Okay, I'm talking about the biblical city of David. So 2 Samuel, because remember, sometimes borders, city limits can change over time. We'll talk about that. But 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 7 says, "Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. The same is the city of David. And David said on that day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites, and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort, and called it the city of David, and David built round about from Millo and inward." So, first, a couple things I want you to notice about this. The city of David originally was a place that David conquered that was a fort. And after David took it, David built round about from Millo and inward. And I want you to remember the name of that place. So we have a stronghold, we have a fort. That is the city of David. So this would be a walled off area, a fortified area. Okay, and so there is. And so this area right here, they will tell you today, this is Mount Zion, this is the city of David. That's what they will tell you. But again, we'll talk about whether or not that's credible or not here in a little bit. But right now, let's stick to the Bible, and let's remember the names of these places. So Psalms 48:12 says, "Walk about Zion, go round about her, tell the towers thereof, mark ye well her bulwarks, consider her palaces, that ye may tell it to the generation following." This right here in Psalms 48 is showing that Zion is a fortified area, which is exactly what we saw in David's day, something that David built on. Now, according to the Reese Chronological Bible, we can't know this for sure, but Psalms 48 was written around the time of Jehoshaphat after the kingdom was divided. So this was several years after the time of David, but even if it's off by 100 or 200 years even, the point still stands that it's going to be making here in this chapter. And notice in verse 1, it says, "Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness," referring to the mount of the Temple Mount. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. Now, they will tell you today that this area is where Jerusalem started. If this is where the temple was, then according to Psalms 48, it was on the sides of the north. This would have been the northern part of the city. And you say, well, that's the southern part of the city today. Yes, because after 2,500 years, the city limits have changed a lot. And if we are right that the traditional Temple Mount location is a Roman fortress, we would then understand that the Roman fortress would not have built till hundreds of years later during the Roman Empire. And so obviously during that time, the city would have expanded to the north. So now that is the southern part of the city. But during that time, that would have been the northern part of the city. But notice all of that is describing the place of the temple, being Mount Zion on the sides of the north in a fortified area. And so now the scripture is going to give us more details on where the temple was built, and there is debate about whether or not, with some people, that this was in the city of David. But we are going to settle that debate today. I'm going to prove to you that this area where the temple was built biblically was the city of David. Okay? And so let's go through some scriptures. 1 Chronicles 21:22. "Then David said to Ornan, Grant me the place of the threshing floor, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord. Thou shalt grant it me for the full price of the plague may be stayed from the people." And you all know this story. David purchases that threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, and he offers up a sacrifice there. Later, in 2 Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 1, says, "Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." So notice, temple was built on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. But notice also it was built on Mount Moriah. Now, today, I'm going to show you they have Mount Moriah and Mount Zion as two separate places. Right here is a Google Earth image, and up here in the northern part, this is the traditional Temple Mount area. And if you look at maps and things that they have, they will tell you this is Mount Moriah up here. And then down here in this area, they will tell you that this over in here is Mount Zion. They have them classified as two different areas. They have this Mount Zion, City of David. Up here, they will tell you is Mount Moriah. Now, if the temple was in fact built in the City of David on Mount Zion, then that would have to mean Mount Moriah and Mount Zion are the same mountain. Today they will tell you they're two different places out of necessity. But what if I can prove to you that they are in fact one and the same? That isn't really a stretch at all, because that term Moriah, it's only used in the scriptures 2 times. And so if I can prove to you that the temple was built in the City of David, then that would also prove that Mount Zion and Mount Moriah are the same place. So you say, well, how do you explain them having 2 different names? Well, that actually isn't difficult at all. We see a lot of examples of this in the scriptures, because not only can city limits and borders change over time, but names of places can also change throughout time as well. And let me show you one great example of this in the scriptures, because often, again, we often go to the Bible looking for proof of something we've already decided is true, rather than us going to the Bible letting it tell us what is true. And so I want to give one great example of how this works. In Genesis chapter 12, in verse 7, it says, "And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord." So right here we have the narrator of the scriptures telling us what Abraham did, and he refers to Bethel. Now, why did he do that? Well, he is wanting to make sure the people that he is writing to understands what he is talking about. But there was no Bethel during that time. It had a different name during that time, because later in Genesis 28 and verse 18, it says, "And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillow and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was called Luz at the first." So understand, when the narrator is telling Israel about what Abraham did, where he built an altar, it gave them a name of a place that they would recognize, so their mind would go to the right place. But here in the story, it's telling us about when Jacob named the place Bethel, but it was called Luz before. And so it'd be like if I was trying to describe some ancient event that took place here in Rock Falls, where I am standing, but it was something from 500 years ago. Okay, I might say where this took place, it was in Rock Falls, right off of Emmons Avenue. Even though there was no Rock Falls then, there was no Emmons Avenue. But understand, it would have been called something else. I don't even know what this place was called before that. And so that if I would use the ancient names, people wouldn't know what I was talking about. So sometimes I might use the modern names to get people's minds in the right place. And so I personally believe, and I think it's clear in the scriptures, that Mount Moriah would have been the ancient name of that mountain, and later it would be called Mount Zion. And I believe the reason too that it refers to it as being Mount Moriah in 2 Chronicles 3 is probably trying to let Israel know, hey, this is the area where Abraham sacrificed Isaac. That's just a possibility. Either way, while I can't necessarily show you the scriptures telling us that's the case, I will say this: if I can prove to you that the temple was built in the City of David, then that would mean Mount Moriah and Mount Zion are one and the same. Because the only other place where we see Moriah mentioned in the Bible is in Genesis 22:2, and he said, "Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of." And I personally think it was either the Temple Mount where he offered him, or could have been the mount where Jesus would die on the cross. Either way would be fine. I don't know for sure. The Bible does not tell us that. But those are the only references to Moriah in the Bible. But this part that where the temple was built, for sure it was built on Mount Moriah, and I'm going to show you for sure it was built on Mount Zion. That was already clear from Psalms 48. But what people will do is they will show you how sometimes Zion can be referring to just Jerusalem and that area in a broader sense. It's not necessarily this very specific location. And that is true. You can often find that in the scriptures. So if you could prove to me Mount Moriah and Mount Zion are two different places, then that would mean in Psalms 48, when it's referring to Zion, it's just speaking of that in a general sense, not a specific sense. But you can't do that. If I can show you that the temple was in fact built on Mount Zion in the city of David, then we would have to conclude Mount Moriah and Mount Zion are the same. Moriah is just probably the ancient name that it had. It's kind of like today you have the Willis Tower, but most of us still call it the Sears Tower because that's what it was called for years. And some of us don't want to let go of that, and so it's referred to as both. And if I say Sears Tower or Willis Tower, people always know what I'm talking about because they've had both of those names, and there's a lot of places like that in the scriptures. And so here's where we're going to see a major mistake that people make when trying to prove that the temple was not built in the city of David. Now let's take some time to look at the main passages where people go wrong about and try to use these passages to prove the temple could not have been built in the city of David. I'm going to show you how wrong they are on this. Let's let the Bible tell us what is true. Let's not go to the scriptures looking for proof of what we've already decided is true. Because sometimes there are verses that are not real detailed in areas where we kind of want them to be detailed because of what we are wanting to know about. They could be viewed in multiple ways. So if there's a dispute on how to interpret them, we need to look for evidence to figure out which is the more likely or the more accurate way to interpret that one line. Okay, now here's where the line is, where they get mixed up. In 1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 1, it says, Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto King Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tabernacle of the congregation, and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle, even those that the priests and the Levites bring up. And King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and oxen that could not be told, nor numbered for multitude. And the priests brought in the ark of the covenant of the Lord unto his place, unto the oracle of the house, to the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. So, the way they will interpret this is they will say, all right, so this means that the ark was brought out of the tabernacle, out of the city of David, and then they had a festival where they sacrificed this multitude of animals, and then it was placed in the temple. That's the way they'll interpret it. And because it was brought out of the city of David, it never went back in to the city of David. That's the way they would interpret this. Okay? Or it's very possible, too, that they brought the Ark of the Covenant out of the city of David. They could have went up here. Or they even could have went over here, which is the area where I believe Jesus died on the cross. And I don't know that for sure, but either way, they took the Ark out of the city of David. But then they had this festival where they offered a multitude of animals that couldn't be numbered. So obviously this would have had to take place in a large open area somewhere. I have no idea where it was. All I know, it was brought out of the city of David. Could have been over this way. I have no idea, but it was brought out of the city of David. But they interpret that with a preconceived idea that this is where the temple was. So when they read that passage, they read, brought the ark out of the city of David, had the festival, and then placed the ark into the temple. I read that also with a preconceived idea, but I'm honest enough to admit it. I believe they brought the ark out of the city of David, they had their festival, and then they placed the ark into the house of the Lord, which was back in the city of David. You say, no, the fact that it says that it was brought out of the city of David, that proves that it was never brought back into the city of David again. No, because the reality is this story is more about the fact that they had this festival where they sacrificed a multitude of animals and that the ark was placed into the temple rather than about the location of the temple being in the city of David. Okay, but let me illustrate it to you this way, while what I am saying very well could be true, and I'm also going to show you it is. But for example, if I said that our congregation met up here at the church, and then we left Rock Falls and went soul winning in Sterling, which is across the river from us, and then after we finished soul winning, we met up at Burger King for lunch. Okay? Now, based on what I said there, if you are not familiar with this area and you interpret what I said the way you are interpreting this passage of Scripture, you would have to assume that Burger King is in Sterling, because he said we left Rock Falls and went to Sterling, and then he says that they met at Burger King. So obviously Burger King's in Sterling, because if he said they left Rock Falls and then they could never have come back unless he specifies that. No, I did specify that when I said after soul winning, we met at Burger King, because Burger King is in Rock Falls. Now, anyone from my church, anyone that is from this area would have known exactly what I was talking about, because they all understand there's no Burger King in Sterling, but there is one in Rock Falls. They would all get that. And so understand, back then when this was written, if they all were well aware of the fact that the temple was in the city of David, he didn't need to say they came back into the city of David and then put the ark into the temple. No, he told them the ark came back in the city of David when he said it was placed into the temple. So do you understand how that works? So either way, well, you can't prove that's the case. Well, again, I can if I can prove the temple was built in the city of David. If I can prove to you the temple was in the city of David, then that is exactly what took place. What these people are claiming is that this is proof the temple could not have built in the city of David. That is ridiculous. That absolutely is not proof. They are going along with their preconceived idea that the temple was built here. But no, I believe the temple was built here. So now let's see if there's evidence in the Scripture. Let's see if we can prove from the Scripture that the temple was built in the city of David. Because if we can, then there's no doubt I'm right on how to interpret those Scriptures. So let's go ahead and look at some more Bible. 1 Kings 3:1, and Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. So I want you to notice this here. Solomon is building several things, and he brings Pharaoh's daughter into the city of David while he's building his house and the house of the Lord. Chapter 7, verse 1. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years and finished all his house. Verse 8. And his house where he dwelt had another court within the porch, which was the like work. Solomon made also an house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto this porch. Now, here's the question. Where was her house built? Chapter 9, verse 24. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Millo. And remember that name, Millo. That's going to be important here in a little bit. So she was in the city of David, but then she was brought out of the city of David. Solomon built a house outside of that for her. 1 Kings 11:27. And this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Millo and repaired the breaches of the city of David, his father. So this area of Millo, it shows kind of the border or the edge of the city of David, his father, which is where he had taken Pharaoh's daughter out of after he built her house, and she lived in there while he was building his house, which was in the city of David. And it's set 1 Chronicles 11:7. And David dwelt in the castle. Therefore they called it the city of David, and he built the city round about, even from Millo round about, and Joab repaired the rest of the city. So this is kind of giving us an idea. Notice these names associated with the city of David and the house of the Lord. This is where Solomon was clearly building his house and the house of the Lord. And this right here, this should end the debate, but we're going to keep going because we still need a reference point. So that's not clear enough. I think it's pretty clear that that's all in the city of David, but again, there's more. And we're going to start getting some reference points so we can check today's location and see if it fits what we're seeing in the Bible. So notice 2 Chronicles 32:1. After these things and the establishment thereof, Sennacherib king of Assyria came and entered into Judah and encamped against the fenced cities and thought to win them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. Notice those fountains without the city. And it says, so there were gathered much people together who stopped all the fountains and the brook that ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? Also he strengthened himself and built up the wall that was broken and raised it up to the towers and another wall without and repaired Millo in the city of David and made darts and shields in abundance. So notice what it's describing here. This is what everyone would agree is referring to Hezekiah's tunnel that was built, which just happens to be in the city of David. And you can find it over in this eastern area is where you go in to what's today is called Hezekiah's tunnel. 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20. And the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, and how he made a pool and a conduit and brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Now, if you are familiar with this area, that just blew your mind right there, because you have walked through a conduit, which is known as Hezekiah's tunnel, and you know where it goes? It goes to a pool known as the Pool of Siloam. All of it in the city of David, interestingly enough. So, again, we're putting all these places together. All these places that are being named, they are all definitely in close proximity. They are all within the city of David. So this is a strong reference point. Okay? This is something we can look at today and say, wow, we've got a fountain of water right here. We've got a tunnel, a conduit that leads to a pool. This sounds exactly like what the Bible describes. And it helps too, they found the Siloam inscription down there that they will tell you dates back to the time of Hezekiah that describes how they built the tunnel. Nobody disputes Hezekiah's tunnel. Nobody. But the scriptures clearly are naming several places around in the city of David. So let's keep all these things in mind and understand that Hezekiah's tunnel was not discovered until the late 1800s. That should have changed everything. But for some reason, tradition trumped facts. And you know what? That's kind of been a part of the Jewish religion for a very long time. And it's always weird watching Baptists support Jewish tradition when their traditions were always getting them in trouble with Jesus and the apostles, but yet Baptists will support them in these things. But everyone agrees Hezekiah's tunnel, the Gihon Springs, is in the city of David, but not everybody agrees that with the Bible in the idea that the temple was built in the city of David. But not only have I already shown you that it was, but again, we're going to see more evidence that's going to give us more reference points. I probably could have just went to the Nehemiah first and ended the debate, but sometimes you got to keep it interesting. But before we look at these next things, let me just address another inconsistent argument people will make against this idea of the temple, the traditional location not being right, and who do you guys think you are in saying you're right about the city of David area? But it is a legitimate question. How can the archaeologists all be wrong? Well, I ask that same question. Here's the difference. You ask, how can they be wrong about the Temple Mount? I'm asking, how can they be wrong about literally everything else? How can they be wrong about the spring, the conduit, the pool, and a bunch of other places I'm going to show you? I am going to show you a bunch of places that the Bible specifically tells us are in the city of David and within the temple. And interestingly enough, you can find all of these places over there today in the city of David. They will tell you those are those places, yet we're, for some reason, not supposed to believe that the temple is there. And it makes no sense. So you are asking, how can they be wrong about one place? I'm asking how they can be wrong about almost everything. That's if you're right about the Temple Mount. So let's look at this scripture here. This was a big one for me when I came across it. Jeremiah 19:1. Thus saith the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen bottle, and take of the ancients of the people and of the ancients of the priests, and go forth unto the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate, and proclaim there the words that I tell thee. The valley of the son of Hinnom is by the entry of the east gate. Well, here's what's interesting about that. This area here, up in here, this western part of the city of David, this is known as the valley of the son of Hinnom, and it goes all the way up to this area in the east. So right here, if the eastern gate was here, somewhere in this area, right here is the valley of the son of Hinnom that goes around and it goes to the west. Okay? Keep all that in mind. So what's funny about this, nobody claims that this area here is the valley of the son of Hinnom. Nobody claims that. This part is designated on the maps as the valley of Jehoshaphat, which actually makes a lot of sense. There's no reason to doubt that. I agree with that. Down in this area, they call it the brook Kidron, or the Kidron Valley. And then when you get down in this area, they will tell you that's the valley of the son of Hinnom. And it makes perfect sense. It fits exactly what we see in the scriptures. But the scriptures tell us the valley of the son of Hinnom is at the entry of the east gate. So if you believe that the Temple Mount, the traditional location is accurate, then you need to go against everyone and admit this is the valley of the son of Hinnom right there. You need to admit that. You need to make that claim. And I want you to go over to Jerusalem, and I want you to tell everybody that's the valley of the son of Hinnom, and they're going to laugh at you. Because nobody thinks that. There's no evidence that that's the valley of the son of Hinnom. But there is evidence if that was the Temple Mount, but it's not. And we're going to see it doesn't make any sense to claim that. But, again, most people aren't paying attention to these passages. Let's talk about Gihon for a minute. 1 Kings 1:33. The king also said unto them, take with you the servants of your Lord, and cause Solomon my son to ride upon mine own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him there king over Israel, and blow ye the trumpet, and say, God save King Solomon. And again, down in this area, over in the east part of Mount Zion, is the Gihon spring. There, and also in that area, is where they found what they refer to as Melchizedek's temple, or Temple Zero is what they want to call it, because they can't call it the first temple, because that was supposed to be in the other spot. But it was the temple, they will tell you. So that's just something they came up with to try to make it consistent with the traditional Temple Mount spot being accurate. And it's not. I do think that's a legitimate temple spot. I just think it was where all the temples were. And that's where Solomon was anointed, at Gihon. Everybody agrees Gihon is there. And notice, okay, I want you to notice this. This was something I just found recently. In 2 Chronicles 32:30, it says, this same Hezekiah also stopped the upper watercourse of Gihon and brought it straight down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. And sure enough, if you go through that tunnel, you are going to end up on the west side of the city of David at the Pool of Siloam. Somewhere in this area. It's hard to tell on this map. It's not close up enough. It's exactly what the scriptures describe, but this is the part that I just recently discovered. Verse 14, now after this he built a wall without the city of David on the west side of Gihon, in the valley, even to the entering in at the fish gate, encompassed about Ophel, and raised it up a very great height, and put captains of war in all the fenced cities of Judah. Now this is huge right here. So during Hezekiah's time, a wall was built without the city of David. So it would have been expanding that area outside the city of David. So that means over here we have Mount Zion, we have the city of David, and to the west a wall was built. And you know what we should expect to find west of there? A valley. Because west of Gihon, what do we have? A valley. And there was a wall there that Hezekiah built west of Gihon. And sure enough, right there is where that valley of the son of Hinnom connects to. That fits perfectly with what we see in the scriptures. Now, let's go up north a little bit on a traditional location, and let's see if that's possible. If that could be if that could be referring to a spot where Hezekiah built a wall during his day. So notice this. So if y'all are right about this being the Temple Mount location, west of here should be a wall somewhere that was built in Hezekiah's day in a valley. Here's the problem with that. We've got to go way over here before there's any kind of a valley. You say, well, then that's probably where he built the wall. No, that's impossible, because you probably can't really see it, but right up in this area is where they have the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Interestingly enough, some of the Baptists supporting Jewish traditions also agree that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is a likely place where Jesus died on the cross. Well, here's the thing. If Jesus died on the cross in this area, the Bible tells us that Jesus died without the city walls, which this would have been outside the city walls during Jesus' day. Many people say that can't be it because that's within the city walls. Well, yeah, it's within the modern city walls because they got a wall going along up here, and they're like, that's within the city. Yeah, that's from the Byzantine period, I believe it was. The walls that are there now came long after the time of Christ. The area of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre would have been outside the walls during Jesus' day. But it would not have been outside the walls if the wall went all the way out to here. That doesn't make any sense at all. So understand what the Scripture is describing here with a wall that was made west of Gihon. Okay? That absolutely could not be connected to this valley over here in relation to the temple or anything like that. It makes no sense at all. And I'm going to show you too, because these waters, these fountain gates, and all these things, they are connected to the temple. I'm going to prove that to you. And there's no evidence of any fountains, springs, or anything like that over in this area. Nobody claims that. There's no natural water in this area at all. Only some aqueducts that came long after the time of Solomon. Now let's go back to that verse that we looked at. Notice, after this he built a wall without the city of David on the west side of Gihon in the valley, even to the entering of the fish gate. Okay, fish gate is another thing you're probably not real familiar with. Look up fish gate in the Scriptures. You will see it is in fact connected with the temple, and it is in fact connected with the city of David. We're going to prove that to you. Notice it compassed about Ophel. That's another place you're not real familiar with, but we're going to see some more verses on that. And raised it up a very great height and put captain of war in all the fenced cities of Judah. 2 Chronicles 27:3. And he built the high gate of the house of the Lord on the wall of Ophel. He built much. Are you going to tell me that Ophel is not connected to the house of the Lord? It absolutely is. Ophel is connected to the house of the Lord. Notice in Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 26, moreover the Nethinims dwelt in Ophel, unto the place over against the water gate toward the east. I mean, folks, where would we expect to find a water gate? Over here. We'd expect to find it on the east side over here in this area where you have the Gihon Springs. Isn't that interesting? And notice the Ophel being mentioned there. Okay? And I can only guess where these were during that time. Again, I believe the prophets. This area was plowed like a field. It became heaps and dens of dragons, and not one stone was left upon another. We're only guessing. But again, we have a really good reference point with Hezekiah's tunnel in the Gihon Springs. Verse 27 says, after them the Tekoites repaired another piece over against the great tower that lieth out even unto the wall of Ophel. So we've already shown that the wall of Ophel, the water gate, the fish gate, these things are all connected to the temple. There's no doubt about that. Okay? This is indisputable. These are facts. And the fish gate, for sure, is connected to the temple. Nehemiah 3:1. Then Eliashib the high priest rose up with his brethren the priest, and they builded the sheep gate. They sanctified it and set up the doors of it, even unto the tower of Meah. They sanctified it unto the tower of Hananiel. And next unto him builded the men of Jericho. Next to them builded Zachar the son of Imri. But the fish gate did the sons of Hassanah build, who also laid the beams thereof, and set up the doors thereof, the locks thereof, and the bars thereof. This is all describing them rebuilding the temple, the walls of the temple, and it mentions the fish gate. Because again, I've already shown that is connected to the temple. Now, Nehemiah 12. This is interesting too. It says, and at the fountain gate, which was over against them, they went up by the stairs of the city of David at the going up of the wall above the house of David, even unto the water gate eastward. So it's mentioning this water gate, it's mentioning the stairs going up to the city of David, eastward. Are you going to continue trying to tell me the temple is not in the city of David? There's no doubt. It's literally describing the repairing of the walls of the temple, and it says it's at the city of David. And it's referring to the water gate, the fountain gate. This is all connected to the Gihon springs that just happens to be on the east part of the city of David. And the other company of them that gave thanks went over against them, and I after them, and half of the people upon the wall, from beyond the tower of the furnaces, even unto the broad wall, and from above the gate of Ephraim, and above the old gate, and above the fish gate, and the tower of Hananeel, the tower of Meah, even unto the sheep gate, and they stood still in the prison gate. Okay? Remember that too. Remember a prison gate that is connected to these walls that are all connected to each other and in the city of David. So stood the two companies of them that gave thanks into the house of God, and I and the half rulers with me. Are you going to tell me this wasn't connected to the house of God? Yes, this is literally what this passage is all about, describing the repairing and the building of the house of God, the repairing of the walls. And all of it is in the city of David. It's got fountains. It's got a water gate. It's on the east. It's got there's an area to the west that has a wall that was connected to Ophel. All these things describe this area perfectly. We should expect west of Gihon for there to be a valley, and sure enough there is. We should expect to find the valley of the son of Hinnom at the entry of the east gate, which is exactly what we see here in this image. So we've already proved beyond any shadow of a doubt, it's indisputable, debate is over. The temple was in the city of David. That is a fact. But if we use the Gihon spring and Hezekiah's tunnel as a reference point, okay, then without a doubt, that is the area of the temple. The only way this is not the area where the temple was built is if the Gihon springs and Hezekiah's tunnel is something else. It means all the archaeologists are wrong about what that is. It means they completely misunderstood the Solomon inscription. It means we just got confused when we saw a conduit of water going to a pool. We just assumed it was the pool of Siloam because it just looks exactly like the same. But you know what? We've never found anything that resembles that up in the traditional area. So yes, I am using some archaeology. I'm using the Gihon Springs and Hezekiah's tunnel to claim this is the area where the temple was built. But where I am completely biblical and only using Bible is that the temple was in fact built in the city of David. And so if all the archaeologists are right that this is the city of David area, then that's where the temple was, not that other place. But I do want to go to one more scripture because, again, when you are actually familiar with the area, when you go and you visit all these places, you start noticing these names that you probably aren't familiar with. You've probably never looked these words up. You've not word searched these things, Ophel and Millo and things like that. But when you go over to these places, when you walk around the area, when you go visit these places, they're very memorable, and it will help you remember these things. But this is what's so interesting to me, because again, some of you are like, how can they be wrong about the Temple Mount? Well, my question is, how can they be wrong about everything else? Because I'm about to show you in one passage a whole number of things that they mention that they will tell you today just happens to be in this area here. And it's like, but the temple's not there? That doesn't make sense. So Nehemiah 3:15. Nehemiah, this is a fascinating passage to me because I know this spot. I know this area they're talking about. And it says, but the gate of the fountain repaired Shallum, the son of Kolhozah, the ruler of part of Mizpah. He built it and covered it and set up the doors thereof, the locks thereof, and the bars thereof, and the wall of the pool of Siloah by the king's garden and unto the stairs that go down from the city of David. So notice we have the pool of Siloah referenced there, same as the pool of Siloam. We have the fountain gate. We have the city of David. Okay? If you go there today and you can see it on Google Earth, go on Google Earth and look in this area, and you will find the pool of Siloam. You will see the Gihon Springs, all in the city of David. Verse 16, after him repaired Nehemiah the son of Azbuk, the ruler of the half part of Beth-zur, unto the place over against the sepulchres of David, and to the pool that was made under the house of the mighty. The sepulchre of David, now that means nothing to you, but that means something to you if you've been over to Jerusalem, because the sepulchre of David is up in this area, right up in that area, right within proximity, very close proximity to the city of David. I think that's interesting. After him, Barak, the son of Zabbai, earnestly repaired the other piece from the turning of the wall unto the door of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. Now that's also interesting to me too, because the house of Eliashib, the high priest, well, also up in this area, I don't know exactly where, I can't see it here on the map, but up in this area is another place called Caiaphas' house. And did you know Caiaphas was the high priest in Jesus' day? And I think it's safe to assume he probably lived in the house of Eliashib, the high priest. That was probably a special dwelling place for the high priest. They have that also in the city of David. And you know what else is right there by Caiaphas' house? An ancient prison is there too, which the prison gate is also being referred to in this passage in the city of David. And if you go there today and you look at Caiaphas' house, there's an ancient prison there, which is where they will tell you Jesus was on trial. So again, I don't know for sure. I'm assuming the archaeologists are right on all these other places. And I think they're just making a mistake about one, the Temple Mount. And I believe there's a reason they refuse to concede that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Verse 26, moreover the Nethinims dwell at Ophel unto the place over against the water gate toward the east, and the tower that lieth out. And sure enough, over here on the east is where we have the Gihon Springs, which makes sense. That's where the water gate would be. So all these things that it mentions, I can take you to all these spots in the city of David, and everybody will tell you that's what these things are. But nobody concludes that, wait a minute, that's describing the place of the temple. Verse 27, and after the Tekoites repaired another piece over against the great tower that lieth out even to the wall of Ophel, from above the horse gate repaired the priests, every one over against his house, and after them repaired Zadok, the son of Immer, over against his house. After him repaired also Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the east gate. And what is the east gate? That famous eastern gate that is referred to, the east gate of the temple. Everything being described here in chapter 3 is about the walls of the house of the Lord. And all of these things, if you go over today and ask where they are, they will tell you it's all in this area. So why is that not the Temple Mount location? It makes no sense at all. This passage is describing all these things that are in today's city of David and the city of David of the Bible. And so the reality is, the reason they're just not going to concede that this was, in fact, a Roman fortress is because the Jews, there's been too much bloodshed. There's been too many wars fought, and tradition is more powerful than anything. And we all know that. I mean, just go watch Fiddler on the Roof. The whole beginning of the movie is all about tradition. That's what they're all about. But understand, in the late 1800s, when they discovered the Gihon Springs, it proved that their tradition was wrong. And there is not historical evidence. It is not historical evidence. There's too many gaps in their history. The basis of this being the spot is tradition. And whenever they read about different historical things that took place, they assume it all took place there because of tradition, not because of any archaeology, not because of any unbroken history, because of tradition. And so understand, these passages we looked at in Nehemiah, this is as late as we get chronologically in the Old Testament, with the exception of Malachi, which doesn't really describe anything about locations. In the New Testament, it doesn't really give any details about locations and things like that. And if you are going to assume that, no, this was for sure at least the temple in Jesus' day up in this area, then you would have to assume Herod moved the temple during that time. But there's nothing in the Bible and there's nothing in history or archaeology that indicates Herod changed locations for the temple. No, that was the Roman fortress Antonia. There's no doubt about that. The city of David is where the temple was built. The Bible tells us that. That is an indisputable biblical fact. The temple was built in the city of David. And I believe the archaeologists when they tell me that this is the city of David. You know why I believe them? Mostly because of the Gihon Springs and Hezekiah's tunnel. That is a really hard thing to get wrong. And so because of that, I have no doubt this is the area where the temple was built. It fits perfect. I think they're right about the Valley of the Son of Hinnom being here. I don't think it's a coincidence. There's a valley over here west of Gihon where the wall was built. Without a doubt, the city of David is the location of the temple. And ladies and gentlemen, having said all that, I rest my case. Thank you for watching this. I hope it was educational and helpful. God bless you, and we'll see you all next time.